Welcome to the Jeremiah Show. Segment 1, Reinvention. Work to become, not to acquire. My special guest today is Markus Klinko. He is an award-winning international artist and photographer who has worked with many of today's most iconic film, music, and fashion stars. Okay, get ready for this mind-blowing list. Markus has photographed Beyonce, Lady Gaga, David Bowie, Jennifer Lopez, Britney Spears, Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, Kanye West, Anne Hathaway, Kate Winslet, Will Smith, Eva Mendes, Kim Kardashian, Naomi Campbell, and Iman. His editorial clients include Vogue, GQ, Vanity Fair, Harper's Bazaar, and Interview magazine. Born in Switzerland, Markus spent his early years training to become a classical harp soloist. He signed an exclusive recording contract with EMI Classics and a management contract with Columbia Artists Management. He received the Grand Prix D disc for recording French harp music with members of the orchestra of Paris Opera Bastille. Markus performed in recitals and as a featured soloist with symphony orchestras worldwide. And in 2024, Warner Music Group reissued his EMI recordings, and they're on Spotify. In 1994, after a hand injury, Markus became a fashion photographer and retired from his international concert and recording career. During that time, he met Indrani, who later became a regular collaborator in her role as his studio's digital post-production artist and photo editor. From there, he created some of our most iconic album covers, including Beyonce's Dangerously in Love and Mariah Carey's The Emancipation of Mimi. Isabella Blow discovered his work at the London Sunday Times and commissioned cover stories from Markus. He photographed David Bowie and Iman during this time. And today, Markus Klinko is recognized widely as the most influential photographic artist of the 2000s. If taking pictures is savoring life intensely, as one photographer once said, then Markus is leading one savory life. Welcome, Markus. Congratulations on your 30th anniversary in the business. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really look forward to our chat.
I do too. It's a real honor to have you. Photography is a big part of my life. Not that I am a photographer, just that I enjoy it, and I really enjoy your photos. I wanted to let the listeners know really quickly here that we will be putting up some of your work on our YouTube channel. If they watch the interview there, we'll see your work, and we're going to talk about some of your most famous photographs. So, Markus, what was the moment, like quote unquote, the moment that you first connected with a photograph? Do you remember?
I would say that was definitely in my early days as a musician, as I was preparing my sort of launch into the world of, international soloists, traveling around the world, giving recitals and being a guest soloist with symphony orchestras. I definitely realized very early on that, you got to be talented. You have to be extremely good at what you're doing, but it's a business like any other business, and there is a marketing component to all of that. So I became interested in my early 20s in men's fashion, in magazines like GQ and French Vogue and all that. And while I never owned a camera and I've never taken pictures during that time whatsoever, but I did enjoy looking at this visual content and also start planning how would I be photographed once I had my first record deal, my first tour poster. And so I played around with some of these ideas, and My entire life, I've been very interested in training, in going to the gym and working out and running and eating healthy and all of that. So those two interests kind of started around the same time, around 19 or 20, where I just wanted to be in the best shape possible, look my best, and perform at my very best. So during my early 20s, all of this sort of took place.
Now, did you, so you connect with multiple photos? You just started, um, it wasn't like one particular photo that said, you said, wow, that's photography is such a unique and beautiful art form. But there wasn't just one thing that you saw that you said that got it, that captured it.
No, it was not just one photograph. It was more general. I would say, at that time in the very early 80s, I probably looked at some Calvin Klein campaigns and some, uh, you know, Versace, Calvin Klein. Those were just overall visual inspirations that I really liked. I found that the typical album cover for classical music, because I was obviously as a classical harpist, my niche within a niche was the classical music world. And I was very bored by that type of visual style of those classical music albums, although obviously I have a few cherished ones that I still like because of the emotional value of it. But photographically, those are not masterpieces. Those are very straightforward, kind of boring photographs. So I realized intuitively very early on, as I said, probably 19 or 20 years old, that for me, once I launched myself into sort of the competitive career moment, that I wanted to have an image that was more of a rock star than of a classical musician. And so, yeah, I would say it was just like the genre that interested me more so than one photograph.
And so you've mentioned that you never really picked up a camera before. So at what point did you pick up a camera? Was it a necessity, as you said, to create your own look, your own brand, your own image?
No, not at all. I never took any selfies. So you have to realize, we're talking
Yeah.
1982, 83. There were no camera phones. There were no phones at all, as a matter of fact, except, old style house phones, but there were no cell phones. There were no camera phones. So having a camera with you at all times, that just didn't happen at that time. And so what I did is I met some photographers who started taking photo shoots, do photo shoots with me more almost like a male modeling type of thing, which is something I've done a little bit when I was very young. During my studies at the Paris Conservatory, I was actually signed to a modeling agency, and I did a little bit of that, to get some extra cash and just have fun with it. I always liked, the pretty girl aspect of a lot of models are very attractive. And so it was something that kind of just like, one thing
Yeah.
led to the other. But no, I never took any pictures myself at
How
all.
long until you knew you were good? Did you realize you were good? That you had an eye for it and a knack for it?
I had zero idea. I was completely focused 100% on becoming the world's greatest harpist.
Yeah.
And all these other things were just tools for me. I was only interested in my, capability to perform the best harp concerts in the world. So that was my only concern.
So how did you hurt your hand? I did all this research and everywhere I looked, it just says that you hurt your hand, but it didn't really give any details.
I
Was
mean,
it
it's
a
a very good question. Nobody knows. I don't know. It was just like, literally at the height of my career, I had already released albums for EMI. I was on a contract to do 3 years worth of tours because with, in the world of classical music, these they happen way ahead of time. So it was simply that one day as you know, my routine was to practice about 10 hours every day. And I had, you know, like, even when I was traveling, even before concerts, I would practice between 8 to 10 hours a day, literally 365 days a year. That you don't, at that level, it's like being an Olympic ice skater or, you know, 100-meter runner. You don't take off. You keep with it in order to stay at that high performance level. So the story basically is that one day I woke up, I started my normal daily practice routine, scales and arpeggios and all that, and something felt very strange with my thumb, and it just didn't really work, and it felt very weird. And I decided I better take a day off and give it a rest. Maybe I had some carpal tunnel or something, I was wondering. So the next day it was worse. So that's when I started to really panic, because it never happened in my entire life. I immediately saw some doctors who said there was nothing wrong with my hand. It was not. So nerve specialist, brain specialist, hand specialist, and they all said they see nothing. But one of the brain specialists told me they were very rare and completely not understood type of malfunctions, almost like a computer glitch, where highly precise, specific movements that are repeated incessantly, like, you know, but it happens to ballet dancers, it happens to musicians, where all of a sudden it's almost like, you know, a key lock. This movement didn't work anymore. And so, you know, I waited a week, I had more exams, and you know, my world collapsed. This was being, you know, featured in the best concert settings in the world, having a major record deal, having, you know, all of this stuff going on. And at the age of 34, 33, you know, all of a sudden I realized I cannot play.
It's
So
all
that was
taken away from you.
it was a big deal. And but one night I was watching a movie in a movie theater, and I had this literal epiphany where I basically all of a sudden knew, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a fashion photographer. And like a veil, all of the regrets and all of the sadness just dropped. And I got very excited. The problem was I'd never taken the pictures. I didn't own a camera. I had no idea what to do. But the next morning, I decided I'm just going to buy a book, and I'm going to read that book, and maybe I'll figure it out. So I bought this book by Ansel Adams, very basic book about how camera works and all that. I read the book, and then I remembered that my dad, I was living in New York, and I remember that my dad, who was still in Switzerland, where I'm born, had an old camera, some old Nikon from the 60s. And I called him up and I said, just please put that into FedEx or DHL or whatever and send me that. So he did. And from my experience as a you know, being photographed a lot as a subject for all these, you know, album covers and things like that, I remember that there was a instant film, an instant roll film that you could process, sort of like a Polaroid type of film. And so I put a 35 millimeter type. And so I got the camera from my dad. I had read the book. I made a lot of notes. I had like a notebook full of notes. The one thing that I knew, I'm never going to assist anyone. That's just not. I was way too pretentious, way too arrogant. That was not a proposition I would, you know, entertain. And I wasn't about to go back to school. So for me, it was just like, I will figure this out. And this was a little bit more difficult than nowadays, because nowadays photography is not that difficult to figure out, because with a digital camera or even your phone, I mean, I would say with a digital camera, you understand what happens with the f-stop and the exposure and the ISO and all that. You see it all happening in front of your eyes. But in the days of film, you had to work with the Polaroids or Polaroid films, and you had to, you know, it was a little bit more complicated. Not brain surgery, but a little bit more complicated. But within a week, I figured out the technical stuff. And then I did something what probably no one has ever done before me. I sold all my harps, had a nice chunk of money sitting in the bank from that. They are very expensive instruments. And I went to the best professional photography store in New York, still having no clue what, you know, photography equipment does. I just knew how, like a tiny little 35 millimeter camera, just a little bit how it worked. And I literally bought the entire store. I bought everything that they had and ordered more. And they were all, and they knew that I have no idea what I'm doing. So
Did they
then I
take
lost.
advantage of you or did they help you?
No, I bought the very best of the
Yes,
best. I bought the best
yes.
lighting equipment, the best grip equipment. I filled up my New York loft with all of that stuff. And, these boxes and truckloads of stuff arrived. And then I got a window mannequin, like a mannequin for fashion. And I started photographing that mannequin for like a whole week. It was every possible film, every possible processing. I drove them labs, the professional processing labs in New York. I drove them mad because I would arrive at 5 o'clock with films of the mannequin, always the same mannequin, dressed with different clothes. So they thought I'm either like insane or whatever.
Yeah.
But and I
Who's
paid
this
them
guy?
rush fees to get it done. But within a week, I also figured that part out. Then I called one of my friends who was a booker at a top New York modeling agency. I explained him what happened to me, and I said, I need models for tests. And he laughed and he said, okay, I think you just want to go on a date. But I said, no, 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 no. I want models for tests. So they sent me a couple, and I did very nice tests, I guess, because before I knew it, I had 25 girls ready to do tests. Then I had 100. And within 3 months, I actually moved from New York to Miami. I spent the winter in Miami, started doing my first magazine shoots, and I moved to Paris, where I, halfway grew up, where I studied at the Paris Conservatory. So I went back to Paris. And within a few days, I found an agent. I went to see Vogue, French Vogue, and the art director at the time, very famous guy, Donald Schneider, and I'm still talking to him after 30 years. He looked at my book and he said, you've only been doing this for 3 weeks. That's pretty good. Or, 3 months, whatever. Like normally people do years of assisting and years of, school assisting, all of that. And I said, I'm not going to hire you right now, but, keep coming back. So then I went to see Thierry Mugler. I don't know how I got an appointment. I think through my connections with the music editors at GQ or something. I was set up with Thierry Mugler, and I showed him one photo and I explained him my story. I said, I love your clothes, Thierry. And he sent me a bunch of clothes and their own house model who was used for all the campaigns in Thierry Mugler. And so I did these very experimental photos with the Thierry Mugler fashion and with the model. And then I went to show it to all of the reps in Paris, all the photo reps. And I was taken within, so I had like literally 4 months of photography under my belt. And so that was a very quick start. And I got to shoot for magazines in Paris and London. Not the biggest ones, more like the underground magazines and all that. I got to experiment. But at the end of the year, when I was ready to move back to New York, I had already shot my first L'Oreal Paris campaign. And so I moved back to New York. And then, for a couple of years, I really started experimenting with the computer. So this is 1996, 97. No photographers had computers at the time. Everything was darkroom still. The computer was completely reserved for the big major fragrance campaigns or Calvin Klein or something like that. But somehow I figured out how to steal a guy from a computer computer operated retouching place in Paris, very high-end shop. And I hired one of their junior guys. I convinced the leasing company to let me lease this $300,000 Barco computer. At the time it was very difficult. Like
Just
today,
whatever it took to make it happen.
yeah, with $3,000 today, you have everything you need.
Yeah.
You are in business. You get a laptop, you get a camera, you're in business. At that time, in order to do what I wanted, it took a lot of work.
Well,
So, and that's sort of my story. That's the
that
thumb
is an
story.
incredible, that's an inspiring story. And
Thank
your
you.
again, your energy, you put your all into everything, obviously, and you're not going to take no for an answer, and you're going to create the life that you want to create, and that very, very inspirational. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back, and we're going to talk about your process. It's just fascinating. What a fascinating story, reinvention. Markus Klinko, global gallery artist and photographer. Markus Klinko is a newly minted blue chip artist at BG Gallery in Bergamont Station, Santa Monica. The relationship began when BG Gallery requested a donation of his photograph, Natural Villains, with David Bowie, for a pause fundraising effort at the gallery. Natural Villains is an iconic portrait of David Bowie with a wolf. And to their delight and their astonishment, Markus agreed. And thus, a relationship between BG and Klinko began and has already blossomed into something so much bigger. At the gallery, Klinko's World, 30 years of pop cultural milestones, November 25th through December 31st, 2024, again at the Bergamont Station and the BG Gallery. It's a revolving exhibition celebrating 30 years of pop culture milestones by renowned photographer Markus Klinko. You can see some of Markus's work on the BG Gallery website at BG Gallery or BG Art Dealings, .com and on artsy.com. You can find Markus Klinko, global gallery and artist and photographer, on Instagram at Klinko Studio and on his website, markusklinkostudio.com. That's spelled MarkusKlinko studio.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.